As night approaches, the protagonists face the threat of encountering the shade once more. Split into 3 groups and sent to different safe houses, they hope to reduce the chances of the shade finding them. However, when they find themselves stuck in rush-hour traffic, unable to reach their safe locations in time, they feel an unprecedented vulnerability and helplessness. Thank you for your subscription and likes. I hope you will leave your comments in the comments section. Chapter 21 Found Anything? I asked Leo, who was sitting on the floor with me. He shook his head. Nothing good. We were staying in a luxurious suite in a hotel. Major Coleman brought us here when the dorm maintenance guys came. He would have gotten us all individual rooms, but we won't be here long, so we saw no point in it. As soon as the repairs are done and the lights working again, we'll be heading straight back to the dorm. Besides, I'm pretty sure we would all wind up sharing one room in the end. I mean, none of us really want to do all this by themselves. The place was furnished with 2 recliners of soft, brown fabric and a leather sofa bed, next to a table which top was a mosaic of stones of different kinds, cuts, and colors. The carpeted floor had alternating stripes of black, gray, and white. On one side, there was a large, flat-screen TV mounted on the wall. Below it was the square, see-through glass cover of a fireplace. There was a separate bedroom with a king-sized bed, but I doubt anyone would use it. For first-timers, I should have been amazed, but compared to our dorm, this place was underwhelming. Now, I've never stayed in a hotel before, not to mention in a suite, because this room probably cost a stupid amount of money and my parents aren't exactly loaded. But I know this place was not meant to accommodate 10 people at a time. To make room, we removed the tiled table so the carpeted floor became our work area. There were some arguing and pushing as to who gets to sit on the sofa. In the end, it was Scarlett, Demi, and Caprice. The rest of us didn't really care and just occupied the empty recliners and even the carpeted floor and got to work. I didn't mind sitting on the floor since the carpet was really soft. Soon, everyone was busy poring over the contents of whatever documents they were holding. Papers and folders and boxes littered all around us. If someone comes in and saw us, they would probably think that we were just a group of good students having a study session for an upcoming test and not reading up on decades worth of information about the shade. How would we even know if we found it? Darius asked. Aside the handbooks from our dorm, Major Coleman provided us with boxes of information about the shade. Newspaper clippings from decades ago, transcriptions of statements taken from countless eyewitnesses. All archived files we wouldn't even know existed if not for Major Coleman. We even had the original reports of the Haunteds from 20 years ago, the very first reports ever since the system was implemented. It was a lot to go through, but no one minded, especially since it would mean saving our lives. Could be something that wasn't in the file or something new to you, I said. Or just share whatever you find interesting. I don't know, man, Leo said. Everything says the same thing. It was true. Most of the files contain the same description, the same observations. Except for some tidbits of information I didn't know about before, which I used to write some sort of timeline. 1974 to 2025 Shade History Timeline. 1974, 51 years cult. Serial killing, mass kidnapping. 1975, 50 years first appearance of the shade. First record of victims, haunteds, having their heads missing in photographs. 1985, 40 years haunted identification system HIS was planned, but without a way to protect haunteds it was useless, so the government started testing various countermeasures. 1990, 35 years Shade Museum was acquired. 1992, 33 years Mrs. Roth proposed the use of UV lights. 2004, 21 years Dark Year. 2005, 20 years Byringen was established. Just keep looking, I said. There are still a lot more materials to dig into, so I was really hoping we would find something. Hey guys, Demi said with a high-pitched voice. Did you know that this shade month originally lasted only a week? Corresponding to the week of serial kidnappings, right? Scarlett said. I've read that. Right, by the cult? Demi said, beaming, as if we were just a group of friends hanging out, exchanging stories and trivia. What do you think they were trying to do? Caprice asked. No idea, Demi said. I haven't read anything about that yet. They're crazy, Kana said. Crazy people do crazy things. I don't know, Kato said, picking up another pile of reports to read. His dark hair swept to one side that his bangs covers one of his eyes. They did manage to create a monster that been hunting kids for years. So maybe they're not that off in the head. I still can't help but stare at Kato. I know we've just survived the most horrific encounter any 16-year-old would have in their lifetime, and looking good is the last thing on our minds right now, but come on. Orange, wool turtleneck and suspenders. It's like he's asking me to make fun of him. On our way here, I told Harmony all about it, hoping to get a laugh. I am in desperate need of a laugh right now. This girl knows a thing or two about fashion. White top with long sleeves and a neckline that reveals her collarbones, matched with a dark blue miniskirt. Her white sneakers with black stripes complete her outfit. I like it. She's cute. But as usual, being the ray of sunshine that she is, Harmony twisted Kato's unique fashion sense into something positive, like he's got his own style. Or fashion is about being comfortable with yourself. Or something to that effect. So I told Kana, who I thought shared my sense of humor, but she actually said that Kato looked good. So I may be wrong here. Right, I said, trying to get back on the topic. So it was a shade week. What happened? Well, Demi said as he started reading the paper he's holding. Looks like after the UV lights prevented any deaths, the phenomenon lingered way past its time. So the week turned to a month. So if it met its quota of 12 dead kids a week, the what do we call it haunting week stops? Kana asked. Maybe, Demi said. It doesn't look like they tested that theory. Gee, wonder why, Kana said. Wait a minute, I said. So that means the shade had been changing over the years. I guess, Demi said. But small changes and not all of a sudden. I turned my attention back to the paper I've been reading. Another year before Mrs. Rott's discovery. But the HIS, or Haunted Identification System, the picture-taking thingy, was already implemented. Apparently, someone had thought that if this thing was summoned in the city, then maybe it was tied to it. So the city tried evacuating all those who are identified as haunteds. And it worked. When the first night of the Shade Week came, nothing happened. There had been no casualties. There were no reports of shade sightings in the city, so they thought they finally figured it out. But the day after, all morning news channels only covered one story. All reports of a possible shade casualty. Only this time it was in Manila, a city adjacent to ours, the place where the haunteds were taken. There hadn't been an incident where the shade appeared elsewhere except here in Bastillo, so as expected, the news went viral. And that didn't sit well with our neighboring countries. There had been multiple meetings between nations about the incident. Various leaders from around the world, mostly from surrounding countries, came to these talks. I imagine it must have been like an ASEAN summit, only they're talking about the shade and not economy. In the end, they concluded that the shade is not tied to our city, Bastillo. Unfortunately, that means that the phenomenon would continue to spread over other cities or possibly across continents, following where the haunteds are. A law was signed forbidding haunteds to leave their city for the duration of the phenomenon. Hey, Leo said as he leaned next to me, trying to take a peek of the report I'm reading. You got something? Oh, I said. This is. I gave them the summary of what I've read. Kato said. Always wondered why they didn't just send us off somewhere else. There was a knock on the door. Chapter 22 room service, said the voice behind the door. Darius got up. I'll get it. He walked over and opened it. Food's here, he announced. 2 waiters came in, pushing their room service trolleys inside. The trolley was literally 3 stacks of rectangular tables on wheels. Plates of food arranged like works of art laden on each level. I spotted a plate of a pancake tower with strawberry slices in between and a scoop of vanilla ice cream on top, and I already know who ordered it. And sure enough, Connor reached for the plate. I took a plate of a tall burger with alternating layers of patty and melted cheese because Major Coleman's paying for this, so why not? After the waiters leave, we started stacking up papers and shoved them into boxes and put the table back. But the table just wasn't big enough to accommodate all of us, so some ate holding their plates. I sat next to Kana, sharing the table. Pancakes for lunch. But the picture looked so good, she said as if dreaming. The burger was so big that I had to spread my mouth beyond its normal range that my jaws were starting to hurt. I could have gone for the knife and fork, but I'm not Caprice. For a moment, we were normal teenagers once again. Eating, talking, and laughing. Caprice kept twirling her seafood pasta. Should we keep looking? What do you think, Virgil? Leo said. I drank my Coke to wash down the burger. Definitely, I said. We still got a lot to go through. You think they tried to, sprinkle holy water on the shade or something? Harmony asked. Oh, I read something about that. Where did I put it? Demi said, more excited rummaging through the pile of folders on his side than finishing his steak. Got it. He opened the folder and flipped through the pages. They did, he said. It looks like they had help from every religion they know. Let's see, there were Catholic priests, Jewish rabbi, Buddhist monks, even shamans and urban ghost hunters. You mean like those TV shows? Harmony asked. You know they're fake, right? Leo stood up to look over Demi's report. They must be very desperate. Demi nodded. They've tried everything. I don't think we're going to find anything that can help us here, Cato said. This guy barely joins in on any conversation. So when he says something, he always gets everyone's attention. We're looking at this wrong, Cato continued. Think about it. We've seen things that never happened over the past years, and yet we're looking for clues from those years. That's like using quadratic equations to write a poem. It's completely different. That makes this all useless, then Leo said. But some of the rules still works, right? Like the U, V, lights and stuff. Indigo said. It was hard not to notice her ketchup drawing of Pikachu on top of her omelet. True, Cato nodded. And that's good. I'm just saying we have to look at this at a different angle. Meaning what exactly? I said. Even if this shade is different from the previous ones, Cato said. Its origin is the same. So what should we do? Indigo asked. We go back, he suggested. Way back. Demi sorted through his stack of folders and hold one up. Here. No, I mean to the very beginning before the shade existed, Cato said. The cult? I asked. He nodded. The serial kidnappings, specifically. We start there, work our way up. If there's a pattern, that's how we'd see it. We've heard the doorknob being opened. Major Coleman's back. From the looks of his face, he definitely wasn't happy about something. We have some serious problem, he said. He picked up the remote and turned the TV on, flipping through channels till he stopped at one. A news channel. Channel 11. The same channel my parents and I were watching at home before I've got into this mess. He back up and went to the side so we can see the news. This was supposed to be the latest story, but the news, this particular one they are showing right now, is all too familiar. I'm sure of it because it just happened last night. It was us. It was a downward shot through the window on what looks like a second-floor bedroom. The person filming was a couple of houses away from us. It must been a very expensive camera because everything was in high definition. So there's no denying that it was us. It zoomed in and showed Scarlett crawling out of our total truck. Then Darius. Everyone else was already standing outside. Then the night guard showed up on the platform and walked down to us, then turned and left us there. We turned around and started running up the stairs. Even with the distance, our screams were captured. The shot whipped through something we were running from, something down the road. What is that? The voice behind the camera said. It was a guy's voice. Now the video was shaking. What is that thing? He whispered as if afraid the thing might hear him and turn on him instead. Panic was creeping in the guy's voice. The shot was following something, but there was nothing on the video. From the road, the shot went up to the sidewalk, then towards the truck and up the stairs before the shot zoomed in on the door of the church. It's right there. I don't understand. It's not showing B, but I swear it's there. It's tall. His body is entirely black. It's standing right in front of the door. Wait, what's it doing? Oh my god, its arm changes. Are you kidding me? Its arm freaking changed. It stabbed the door. It's screaming. It's in pain. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's very angry. The video showed the door. A gaping hole looked like it magically appeared on it. Of course, it wasn't magic, it's just the camera not being able to capture the shade. I don't know what happened next because the shot cut away back to the news anchors. One was discussing how frightening it was while the other was considering the possibility of it being a hoax. Major Coleman turned the TV off. So much for keeping it a secret, Cato said. It's not so bad, I said. I mean, it didn't show anything. Aren't you guys good at covering up stuff? Leo asked. We're doing what we can, Major Coleman said. But you have to remember that even the slightest indication of this being linked back to the shade, and in extension to you, the public will turn on you. It happened before, and so it is not a stretch to say that it will happen again. I, for one, would very much like not to witness that, he sighed, scratching his head. And then there are those parasites to deal with. Parasites, sir? Demi asked. The media. If they manage to make the connection, they'll be swarming Byringen like moths to a lamp. Not that they could get close without being shot, but I prefer to keep things quiet. Remember, rumors and superstition were all it took for the city to lose its mind. He sighed again. Anyway, how are you guys doing? Actually, about that, I said. Major Coleman, we might need everything you have on the cult. Major Coleman blinked. The cult. We bring Major Coleman up to speed of what we've discussed. Well, he said. Have you been to the museum? Chapter 23. Remember, Major Coleman said. Not one word. Major Coleman was taking extra precaution, but honestly, I think this is a bit of an overkill. We were all dressed in matching uniforms from my school. Even driving here on our school's minibus, just to make it more believable. It's a 16-seater, so we have room for the 2 soldiers Major Coleman brought along. He really didn't explain why. Must be standard procedure. They were supposed to be our teachers supervising us on our field trip, so they were in casual clothing. The influences that Major Coleman must have, to be able to provide all these on such short notice. The museum Major Coleman mentioned was not far from our hotel, so we made a quick visit. Our class actually had our field trip here last month, but I don't remember anything that might help us. Then again, a month ago I wasn't really paying attention. We were in line for the reception inside the lobby of what seemed like the living room of a modest house. The queue was long. Apparently, 2 other schools are actually having their field trip today. The entrance was free, but we have to write down our name, occupation, and current address before we can enter. I brought Kana's penknife with me, securing it in my pants pocket. I know it's useless against the shade, but somehow having it with me makes me feel a bit better. Good thing this place didn't have metal detectors. The guard who inspected it just warned me not to write on the exhibits, obviously not aware that my black metal pen has a hidden knife inside it. There was a huge statue of the shade made from black stone standing in the center. Of course, all the old features. No red eyes, no gaping jaw, especially no legs and arms that can transform. They might need a new statue of the shade, Darius said. Show Scarlet warned. Not so loud. Under the statue, a tour guide was giving a tour to a group of Koreans about the history of the museum. We were given the same tour last time I was here. At the time, even though I really wasn't taking this whole shade killing seriously, the history was really interesting as it explains the house-like entrance, so I guess that's why the story sticks. It goes like this. The museum was the home of the boy, Francis Martinez, which is why the museum resembles a 2-story residential house. He died 40 years ago. His parents, devastated by the loss of their only son, turned his room into a shrine of sorts. All of his pictures, newspaper clippings, articles downloaded from the internet, and their own theories of the shade when the phenomenon was still fresh can still be seen inside the galleries. First, it was just neighbors and friends who know about it. But the word spread, and soon the place became another place for hungry journalists to prey upon. But thanks to the publicity, it attracted the attention of other parents and relatives of haunteds who've lost their lives. These people became frequent visitors. Soon, an official support group had been set up for families who suffered through the same loss. It became a tradition to bring the picture of their lost loved ones over during the meetings. Some brought their own sketches of the shade. I always thought it was weird why this place didn't have a single photo or video recording of the shade, but now I understand because of Shade Rule 5. The shade doesn't bear any reflection on the mirror or its image captured by any devices. A father wrote his own book about his research on the shadow monster and donated it to the place. The shrine grew more and more as the contributions poured in. Soon, the house became the place to go to for first-hand knowledge about the shade. Eventually, they got so many visitors and even tourists that they could no longer accommodate all at once. They decided to turn the old house into a proper museum. They started a crowdfunding campaign through social media. It was a huge success. The campaign went viral both domestically and internationally. They were making good money from anonymous donors all over the world. Renovations after renovations, The house grew more rooms and equipped with the latest facilities one might see inside a museum. And then the government stepped in. And the rest was, well, history, the tour guide concluded. After hearing that the second time, I'm still not sure if the tour guide intentionally made that bad pun. If she did, then why isn't she fired? Hey man, Leo called, handing me the pen. I signed in. While the others were still in line, I entered the gallery, along with the steady stream of guests and students. There were already a lot of people inside. I took a quick look around, trying to see if anyone is giving us funny looks, but it seems like the disguise works because not one person even spare us a glance. The room was cold from the square air conditioners installed on the ceiling. The marble walls were white and bare. I saw only one exhibit. In the center of the room was a huge, standalone wall that almost takes up the entire room. Mounted on the wall was a painting of the same size. Tourists were flocking in front, blocking my view, so I stepped a bit closer towards the painting, right next to Indigo and Kana. They were both fixated at the thing, scanning every inch of the painting, absorbing every hue, every stroke on the canvas with the same intensity a dog would give to a half-eaten hamburger. The painting depicted the shade, the old shade, of course, just a black shadow, a silhouette of a man hovering in the middle of the room, in the middle of sleeping children. It looks like it was set in a room inside an orphanage, with the kids sleeping in separate identical beds wearing identical white pajamas. I say sleeping, but their eyes were wide opened. At the far end of the room was an open door. Under the doorway was the nanny, slumped to the ground, her head leaning at the door frame. She was staring, just staring with a blank expression tinged with a faint smile. A smile of absolute surrender in a hopeless situation. "It's hauntingly beautiful," Kana said, suppressing a smile. Indigo stared at her as if she's speaking in a foreign language. "Why are you smirking?" "You know, because it's the shade. And the shade haunts us." Her mouth gaped when she gets it. She was laughing as if Kana just told her the first joke in the world. Then I remembered that she's homeschooled, so maybe terrible puns are not part of her upbringing. She stopped, catching her breath. "Thank you, by the way. You know, you don't have to thank someone for their corny jokes," I told Indigo. I immediately felt Kana's elbow dug into my ribs. "I know that," Indigo said, irritated by my treating her like an idiot. "I meant for the compliment." She turned to Kana. "You really think it's beautiful?" "I do." But Kana said, looking as confused as I was. I look at the portrait of the shade again. It is beautiful, but why would she thank Kana? Even she doesn't get it. Then, my eyes drifted to the bottom right of the painting. At the feet of the bed of a curly red-headed boy, the name Indigo was written in blue paint. I turned to Indigo. Now it's my jaw's turn to drop. "No way." She just smiled. "So when you said you paint, you meant..." I pointed at the painting. Kana exclaimed, taking Indigo's hands in hers. "That's incredible." "Wow," I said. "So you're a genius, a gifted, like, a prodigy." Indigo blushed. "Ah, thank you." We heard Major Coleman called over for us. We head back to the group. Major Coleman led us towards the back of the painting. The backside of the wall was actually a huge commemorative plaque. Names of previous haunteds who died were etched in gold. They were arranged in columns based on the year of their deaths. We didn't stop to appreciate the plaque more and head straight for the exit. I walked next to Kana. "I didn't know you two were close," Kana said. "Actually, that was the first time we've talked." "But weren't you?" I said. Then I leaned over and whispered, "Stranger avoidant." Her lips curled up to a faint smile. "Yeah, well," she said. "With all that had happened, it just seems silly now, don't you think?" I get what she was saying. I really do. It's like things that were once such a big deal doesn't really matter anymore. I mean, I brought a deadly weapon with me to the museum and didn't even think twice about it. Old me would have been scared of being caught, of getting in trouble. Funny how a couple of near-death experiences can change a person overnight. I guess so. We came out of the gallery and into another hallway. The walls were painted pink. Busts of the shade on top of marble pedestals spanned across the length of the area. I took a closer look. It was made with a metallic material, lustrous and of dark color, probably for accuracy of the real one. I lingered for a bit, looking to the left side of the hallway to Mrs. Roth's gallery, the reason we are still alive today. I looked back to the group and saw them already walking towards the opposite direction, leaving me behind, so I jogged for a bit and slowed down to a walk when I caught up to Indigo. My mind went back to that huge Jumbotron-sized painting of hers. I've never really talked to her, so I really don't know her. Then I remembered about our first night in the dorm, about how I basically slapped her hand away for trying to help me clean up. I'm sorry, by the way. She looked at me, her eyebrows knitted in confusion. About what? The night, Mr. Donovan. I paused. I couldn't bring myself to finish that sentence. I was covered in blood. And you were only trying to help. It didn't bother me, she said. She looked down. That night, I didn't stay. I ran back inside as soon as I saw the shade grew eyes. I knew something wasn't right. And you did the right thing, I said. She nodded. My point is what you guys went through that night. I would never understand. She raised her head and looked at me. I was never mad at you. My shoulders felt lighter. A smile appeared on my face. Thanks, I said. We turned a corner and climbed up a set of stairs. This is the first time I've gone up to the second floor. We came upon a set of doors. Major Coleman turned the knob and pushed the door open, ushering us inside. Rows of shelves filled with different kinds of books dominated the room. Hardbound, softbound, folders of transparent plastic and brown envelopes. On one side there were several computers lining the wall. Long tables and chairs with cushioned seats occupied the center. There was quite a number of visitors here, too. A group of kids who seemed like our age was busying themselves over papers with pencil sketches. When I took a closer look, it was all drawings of the shade, done in different styles. There was one which, at first glance, you'd think it was a high-definition picture of the shade downloaded from the internet. Another was just random shapes of triangles, circles, squares thrown together to form the image of the shade. And then there's this dude who drew the shade in anime style with big eyes and all. But the eye color was blue, different from what we've seen, so I assumed that this was just his style and hopefully not influenced by the real one. Despite the number of people here, there was a calming silence to the place. Dragging chairs and the occasional murmurs made up most of the noise. On another table, there were a boy and a girl, both were just reading. I get that it's a library and what else can you do in one, but they are completely ignoring each other. But I got to admit, losing yourself into a book that everything else seemed to disappear from existence is kind of cool, I guess. Why would you bring your date to a library? Leo said. And why this specific one? I added. How do you even know they're a couple? Kana asked. They could be siblings. Darius and Scarlett look at each other. Even stranger, they both said in unison. We had to control ourselves from laughing out loud so we don't bother others, resulting in a group of teenagers snorting and faking a coughing fit, which in itself must have been more distracting. It was probably mean making fun of others, especially if they don't even know about it. But that's what makes it funnier. And after last night, I really couldn't care less. We needed something like this if we want to keep our sanity intact. Catching my breath, I saw Major Coleman walked over the counter with an old lady with glasses sitting behind it, who I'm guessing is the librarian. The librarian seemed to recognize Major Coleman. They talked for a bit. The librarian took a glance at us and leaned closer to Major Coleman, whispering something. I don't know what Major Coleman said, but the librarian disappeared to the door behind her. The door on the left of the counter with a "For personnel use only" sign opened, the librarian peeking out of the doorway. Major Coleman called our attention and gestured for us to enter. Chapter 24. Inside was a small conference room, the kind used for meetings. On the left side of the wall are wooden shelves with glass sliding doors. A flat-screen television is mounted on the wall across the room. There was just one table, a white and oval one, but it was large enough to be shared with a dozen people. Major Coleman had us take a seat on black, modern chairs while he and the librarian busy themselves over one of the shelves. Of course it goes without saying that everything you learn here remains a secret, Major Coleman said as the librarian set down a white storage box. The words "Cult Investigation" was written on the lid in red ink. You kept something like this in a public library? I asked. Major Coleman pointed at the door where we came in. That is a public library. This room here is a government facility for storage and documentation, he explained. pointing down the floor with both his fingers. Everything you'll see is strictly confidential. We usually keep this type of information private for obvious reasons, even for Haunted's eyes. I think Haunted's would think twice to mess around with something like this, Leo said. Major Coleman just shrugged. Can't be too careful. Cato picked up on my question. So acquiring the museum, building a library on the second floor, a misdirect. A sleight of hand, he stammered for a bit, seeming lost for words. How do you kids call it? His face lit up and snapped his fingers. Ah, he exclaimed. Trolling. No one dared to correct him because he looked so proud of himself of knowing that word. And I don't want to be the one to wipe the grin off his face. Right, I encouraged. The others started producing somewhat convincing noises of approvals. I thought that the librarian was going to get more boxes out of the shelves, but she went out of the door. Kana lifted the lid off. Her eyebrows knitted together. Is this it? I stood from my chair and leaned over. There was just one brown folder inside. I picked it up. Major Coleman. I asked him. We need everything. You're holding it, Major Coleman said. His face was a mixture of embarrassment and disappointment. We know very little about them. We don't know what their goal was, what they believed in, their current whereabouts. Everyone started crowding around me. Current whereabouts, Caprice said. My teacher said they were all killed during the massacre. All that was present, yes, Major Coleman said. As you will read inside, we never found their church. My hand was about to open the folder when Major Coleman stopped me. You should also know that the pictures inside are quite graphic. He wasn't kidding. Attached to the reports were pictures of the gruesome encounters. The first photo was what I assumed to be after the massacre took place, based on the number of dead bodies shrouded in black cloth. Another picture showed the students hanging from the ceiling, suspended with cables and meat hooks through their necks. Their heads were missing, not chopped off because that would show bones. No, their heads were gone, like it was photoshopped out of their bodies. I'm guessing this is how the Haunted's identification system was established, Cato said. Major Coleman leaned over. Ah yes, at first we don't know what to make of the missing heads. But years of comparing photos through generations of Haunteds, it stayed consistent. This led us to theorize that this is how the shade marks its intended victims. Any other kid would have thrown up or burst into tears seeing these photos, but not us. Compared to Kent's and Eris deaths, these gory images are boring. Besides, we have a goal in mind. We were too busy to be scared. I was expecting to see something more of a cult church. But ignoring all the dead bodies and the hanging corpses of the students, the place looks more like an empty, abandoned warehouse. There was nothing cult-y about it. No statues, no altars, nothing. The prevailing theory was that the warehouse was not their church at all. Just a site they've chosen to perform their ritual in since it was close to the schools they've targeted. If the church and all of their teachings do exist, well, we've never come close to finding them, Major Coleman explained when I asked him about it. There's this other photo of a symbol on the floor, drawn with what I assumed to be blood. It was a black sun with a red eye in the center. The sun had exactly 12 licks of flame. The tip of each flame points to a different animal marked with a lit candle. That's the zodiac symbol, Harmony said over my shoulder. Except for the eye and black sun. I kept on reading. Apparently, the victims were born on different zodiac dates. So, the Haunteds aren't based on age, but on when they were born. That is the recurring pattern over the years, Major Coleman said. Well, I was born on September 6th. That makes me what? A Virgo, Harmony offered. I know zodiac. I'm October 9th, by the way. Libra. Everyone started volunteering their date of birth around the table, with Harmony helping to identify their zodiac signs as I listed down. Virgil, September 6th Virgo. Harmony, October 9th Libra. Cato, February 15th Aquarius. Indigo, March 12th Pisces. Darius, May 18th Taurus. Demi, June 20th Gemini. Kana, July 22nd Cancer. Scarlet, November 6th Scorpio. Caprice, January 14th Capricorn. And you, Leo, I said. August 10th. Leo, he said. And Eris is April 7th. Want to take a guess if she's an Aries? Your parents aren't that creative, are they? I said. He just shrugged. I guess that leaves Sagittarius. For Kent. Right? Kent. We have no way of knowing his birthday. Not that it matters. How is this going to help again? Kana asked. Not sure, I admitted. But it's something. Photos kept getting passed around. I was holding a picture of the dead body of the cult leader, Daniel Cruz. He had common features. Black hair, brown skin, narrow chin, and thick eyebrows. He died with his eyes open, so I can see that they're brown, too. His most distinguishing feature was the mole beneath his left eye. The report said that he had no credit card information. No known address, education, and employment history are blank. It's like he just popped up out of nowhere. It's not just him. Most of the members killed that night still hadn't been identified. So how did you get his name? Indigo asked Major Coleman. They've had TV stations ask viewers for any information, Major Coleman explained. For a reward, of course. An old classmate called in when they flashed his face over the evening news. So he managed to erase his past, live off the grid, and abduct 12 kids in a week, I said. How do you think he did it? Your guess is as good as ours. Major Coleman said. You have the symbol, access to our blood, Cato said, sliding Major Coleman the ritual symbol picture. Surely you've tried to replicate the ritual, unsummon the shade. We can't, Major Coleman said. We don't know how. We brought in occult experts, famed astrologists, and even historians and scholars to figure out the ritual. But no such luck. He pointed at the sun eye symbol. We can't just draw the symbol and hope that it'll work. It will be no different than a doodle. Without the knowledge of the ceremony, the chants or prayer, there simply isn't anything we can do. But of course, we banned all documentaries about the cult, removed all articles on the internet. Any information we have about the cult are either not made known to the public or had been deliberately changed. In case someone's crazy enough to try and actually replicate it, I said. And actually manage to repeat the ritual, Major Coleman said. These vials. Cato said, holding the picture up to Major Coleman. What were they for? We believe that they drained the blood of each student and stored them inside individual vials for consumption, Major Coleman explained. I'm sorry, what? Caprice said. Kana was turning green. That's like super gross. And that's how you get HIV, Darius said. Caprice stared at him, her mouth and eyes wide in horror. What is wrong with you? Darius put his hands up. I'm just saying. Her sister, Scarlet, looked down, shaking her head. But it says here that there were only 6 vials found, Cato said. Wait, why only 6? I asked. Weren't there 12 students abducted? That's what I've been thinking, he said. It doesn't add up. And you think them drinking blood was part of the ritual? I asked Major Coleman. If you read further, Major Coleman said, you will see that the strike team went in during the middle of their ceremony. They interrupted the 7th vial being delivered to the cult leader when it happened. Whatever the cult was trying to do, they weren't able to finish it. So the rest of the vials, I said, they never made it to the cult leader. That makes the shade what? Cato said. An accident. Maybe, Major Coleman said. For a moment, the room went silent as we absorbed this new information dropped on us, the implications it had. Did you catch any member? Demi asked. Interrogated one. Sadly, no, Major Coleman said. These people, they didn't fear death. They welcome it. They saw it as a necessary step towards their goal. So whenever one was cornered, they would always choose the bullet. Either ours or their own. And the cult and its members have never been found again, right? Indigo said. Correct, Major Coleman said. Personally, I believe they're still out there, practicing their twisted ways. Now the secrecy and excessive defenses of Byringen make sense. The cult could still be out there. But they never made any move. Or have they? Did they have something to do with the sudden change of the shade? So, what are their plans? When will they move again? Why haven't they revealed themselves yet? What are they waiting for? I knew it was too much, I said. The lengths you went to hide the location of the dorm of Byringen. It wasn't just to keep us away from the public. It was more to protect us from the cult. It was deemed best not to underestimate the cult, Major Coleman said. The discussion ended. No one had anything else to ask, to say. We weren't any closer in solving the mystery. Despair was building up in me. Maybe we were just kidding ourselves. What exactly was I hoping for? If even the government and experts, with all their resources and years of study, admitted of being just as clueless, what chance does a group of teenagers have? And tonight, we were going to face the shade again. Maybe for the last time. Well, Harmony said, at least the lights still work. For a moment, there was silence. I just stared at her in disbelief. How can she be so optimistic about it? Don't forget. We just killed it last night, Leo followed. No one has ever done that. My mood shifted from desperation and fear to hope, and maybe feeling a little bit embarrassed. They were right. If even Leo's feeling confident about our odds, then I must be overthinking this whole thing, which I usually do. We already beat the shade once. We just have to do it again. And this time without losing anyone. Still, abducting 12 students in 1 week, bringing the attention of the police to their activities. Cato said, not the smartest way to get just a few ounces of blood. I agree. They didn't need a lot. Just enough to fill their vials. The vials made me remember my physical with Kana when Nurse Erin took our blood. And stored them in vials. That's it. I jumped out of my seat. You're a genius. What? Cato said, looking shocked. I turned to Major Coleman. Since when did Haunteds need to take physical exams? Major Coleman said, clearly startled by my sudden question. It was actually new this year. And you believed that the cult might still exist, right? What if the cult found out that there are fresh supplies of Haunted's blood ready for them to take? Demi's face lit up. Then they could perform the ritual again. In secret this time, Leo added. Cato nodded. That would explain the drastic changes of the shade. A cultist could have gotten hold of all our blood and performed the ritual. But to know that, you'd have to be within the system, Major Coleman said. The school doctor or the nurse. Right, I turned to Kana. Your dad took your blood, right? Erin took mine. We can go ask. Seeing her reaction made me paused. I was on a roll, so absorbed about making my point, so hopeful about planning our next move that I didn't realize the implications of what I was saying. That, indirectly, I'm accusing her dad as a cultist. Chapter 25. My dad is not a cultist, Kana said in a measured, low voice. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? She yelled, slamming her hands on the table. It sounded more of a challenge than a question. I dreaded saying any more. I didn't mean it that way, I said, glancing around the table, looking for anyone to take my side. But most of them have their eyes on Kana, wide and unblinking, stunned from what they were seeing. They were more surprised than scared because this is the first time they ever saw this side of her. Oh, they have no idea. Major Coleman cleared his throat. No one is saying anything, but for now we have to get on our next move. Guys, let's just calm down. Okay. We're all friends here, Harmony added. My throat tightened. It was hard to get the words out. I wasn't accusing her dad of anything. Excluding Indigo, all of us came from different schools. Each would have a different doctor. Even if her dad was indeed a cultist, it was highly unlikely for her dad to acquire all the blood from all these schools. I'm sure there are protocols in place that make it difficult, if not impossible, for one school to request for the blood of the Haunteds from another school. But I'm convinced that even if I tell her this, it wouldn't help my case. Because from her perspective, I'm accusing her dad of doing something horrible. And that makes me worse than the shade. So I kept it to myself and averted my gaze. I think we should check places where the cultist might have gotten our blood. I didn't really know how she would take it. I braced myself for another shouting, but good thing Cato intervened before she can say anything. Look, if you want, we can check your dad's clinic first so we can rule him out. Not that he's a suspect or anything, Harmony reassured Kana. Fine. I'll prove to you all that my dad is not a cultist, she said. Kana stood up so abruptly that her chair was knocked down behind her. Let's go. Then she stormed out of the room. Major Coleman glanced at his wristwatch. We might be cutting it too close, but if this helps us figure out the shade, then we'll make time. Inside the minibus, Kana was sitting alone at the back, her arms crossed at her chest. She kept her eyes outside, refusing to look at me, at any of us. Dude, just leave her alone for a while. She'll calm down, Leo said. Ugh, what a drama queen, Scarlett said, rolling her eyes. Hey, Darius scolded her. You'd do worse if someone talks trash about Mom. You know that, right? Scarlett considered this for a moment. I'll be nice. I would never have expected that from her. Caprice said. You'll see why, I said. Then I snapped at Darius. And I'm not talking trash about his dad, you musclehead. At this point, I don't care if he's bigger than me. I may be overreacting, but I didn't like what he said. Guys, Harmony said. Please don't. Whatever he was going to do, he changed his mind. Let's just drop it, Darius said. It was just half-an-hour ride, but it felt like it was the longest I've ever taken to school. When we got to the school's clinic, we caught Kana's dad, Dr. Bernardo, at the perfect time. The room was empty. Not even his assistant, Aaron, was here. I guess that's to be expected, considering some classes end at 3 o'clock. Mr. Bernardo was sitting behind his deck. He looked up as soon as we entered the room. The confusion registered on his face immediately. Dad, Kana yelled. Mr. Bernardo got around the table and opened his arms. Kana didn't hesitate to run to her dad's embrace. No wonder she was so mad at you, Darius said to me. You just dissed her favorite person in the world. I've heard of Daddy's girl, but this is the first time I've ever seen one. Like for real, man. We love our parents, but even Scarlett's not like that. I told you, I said, giving him a look. It wasn't like that. Whoa, chill, he said, putting his hands up. I was just saying things back then, trying to get Scarlett to lay off her. I'm sorry, all right? We cool. I nodded. We cool. Dad, Kana said. These people want to ask you something. Is that right? He turned his attention to Major Coleman, extending his hand. How can I help you, Mr. Major Lewis Coleman? They shook hands. I apologize for coming on such short notice, Dr. Bernardo, but we must confirm something with you. Dr. Bernardo smiled. No need for formality, Major Coleman. You won't bother anyone here. Very well then, Major Coleman said. The rest of us, including 2 of Major Coleman's men, kept quiet at the side. What happened to the blood that you've taken from Kana and Virgil? He asked, going straight to the point. This must be a military thing. No wasting time, no beating around the bush, just get on it with and be done with it attitude. I like it. Oh, Dr. Bernardo stammered, clearly not expecting a question like that. We follow the proper procedure, of course. After testing and getting the results, the blood vials are tagged for incineration and are placed inside biohazard bags to be collected by professionals who handle the disposal of biohazard wastes. So the incineration, it doesn't this happen here at school. No, we don't have the necessary resources to do so. Who else has access to the blood? Besides me, just my nurse. And of course, those who collect it. Yeah, where is Aaron? Kana asked, standing very close to her dad. He's been absent for 2 days now. Didn't really leave a reason why. Did you process the blood yourself? Aaron took care of it. Insisted, actually. I just took my daughter's blood, Dr. Bernardo said, patting Kana's head. Major Coleman shot me a look. One last thing, do you mind if we've searched the premises? Of course not. Please. Major Coleman and his men started turning the room upside down. Cabinets, drawers. Not even Dr. Bernardo's desk was safe from the inspection. And I suppose I can't ask the reason behind all these. Correct. And of course, please keep this matter confidential. After 15 minutes of searching, Major Coleman and his men put the things back to their proper place. Dr. Bernardo stepped forward. Have you found what you were looking for? We have. Major Coleman extended his hand. Thank you for your time, sir. You're welcome, they shook hands. And thank you for keeping my daughter alive. We are doing our best. I can see that, he said, looking at us with a satisfied smile. But then his eyebrows furrowed. Aren't there supposed to be 12? I was startled by what was surely an innocent question Dr. Bernardo made. But I didn't make it show. I did my best to maintain a straight face. Harmony had no trouble giving a convincing smile. I just hoped the bead of sweat trickling down the side of her face wouldn't give her away. For some of us, the floor suddenly became interesting. What happened these past nights? Especially the deaths cannot be made known to the public. I wondered how Major Coleman was going to explain this. Yes, they're back at the dorm, in bed with the flu, he said, looking at Dr. Bernardo straight in the eyes. He didn't even flinch. His voice steady. It is the flu season. Could you also please keep an eye on my little girl's vitamins? Make sure she's taking them. Dad, Kana complained, her face burning red. I'm not a kid anymore. I can take care of myself. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I know you can. I will personally make sure she does, Major Coleman said, giving Kana a look, making Dr. Bernardo laughed. I guess he bought it. Again, thank you, Dr. Bernardo. We'll be taking our leave now. Kana gave her dad another bear hug before she let go. Bye, Dad, she said. Her dad bent down and planted a goodbye kiss on her forehead, and she melted in his arms. Take care of yourself, okay? When he let go, Kana skipped past us, smiling in bliss. We followed her out and left Dr. Bernardo back to his work. After a minute of walking back, Kana stomped straight up to Major Coleman, stopping him on his tracks. Well, what do you think? She said, raising an eyebrow at him. Major Coleman just smiled at her. I believe he's telling the truth, he said. Plus, he gave us a big lead. The nurse? I asked. Major Coleman nodded. So what now? Demi asked. Rinse and repeat, Major Coleman said, till we identify all of those involved. He breathed a sigh of relief. This trip just made our work a whole lot easier. Sir, what happens to any cultists you catch? Demi whispered, though I doubt anyone would hear us here. Assuming that said person is indeed a cultist. But even if that person is not, stealing biohazard items is a criminal act and he or she will be serving time in jail. We continued walking through the hallways, passing by empty classrooms and classrooms where lessons are still being discussed. Kana seemed to be in a good mood, so I took this opportunity to apologize, even though I still don't believe I'm in the wrong here. I speed up a little, catching up with her. Look, I'm really sorry, but I never said your dad was it. She looked down, her face flushed red. No, you're right. I should be the one apologizing. It's just, I can't stand it when people say mean things to him. You love your dad. I get it, I said. She raised her chin so that her eyes are finally looking at mine. Friends, she said, holding out her pinky finger. I can't help but smile. Aren't we a little too old for this? Her cheeks turned red. Then forget it. She turned and hurried away. I took 2 long steps to get in front of her. I'm sorry. I was kidding. I raised my pinky finger. Friends. The corner of her lips turned upwards into a sweet and shy smile that suddenly my pulse started racing. She interlocked her pinky finger with mine. Okay. Friends. When we settled down inside the minibus, Kana apologized to everyone. There were some comments about how she should have handled it, but overall, no one really stayed mad at her for that. It wasn't really that big of a deal, and we have bigger issues to deal with, seeing as it's almost night. Major Coleman was driving, so I walked up to the front of our school service. So it's back to the dorm for us. Not exactly, Major Coleman said. We had already driven a good hour when Major Coleman stopped in front of a hotel that I don't recognize. We filed out of the minibus. This isn't our dorm, right? Leo said, sizing up the luxury building. We thought it best to separate you. Makes it easier to protect you and harder for the shade to get to all of you in case we encounter complications. Major Coleman said, being careful of the word he's using. Probably don't want us to freak out as it's only a couple of hours before sundown. By complications, you mean like how the shade went on a killing spree last night. Kana said, yes. We didn't know what we were dealing with, but we survived. I intend to do so again. According to Major Coleman, they only managed to set up 3 safe houses for us. The base camp, the dorm, and this hotel. So the plan is to split us into 3 groups. Staying here were Darius and, of course, his sister, Scarlet, along with Caprice. Those going back to the dorm were Kato, Harmony, and Indigo. Demi, Kana, Leo, and I, being the largest group, are headed for the base camp. The plan was simple. The group that the shade appeared to must deal with the shade. And if that group failed, at least the other 2 groups will be prepared. With Major Coleman and his 2 men practically shoving us apart to our respective groups and rides, we had no time to process the fact that this might be the last time we'll see some of us alive. Chapter 26. Our group went back to the minibus, with Major Coleman as our driver. He was driving smoothly, for about 5 minutes after we left the hotel. We've been stuck in traffic for some time now. We were at the intersection, There was a waiting shed with a horizontal LED banner whose messages scrolls from right to left. It shows the name of the current mayor and then the time, 5:33 p.m., scrolls in. Obviously, our minibus is not stored with you. V. Searchlights, coming straight from my school and all. It was supposed to be a quick visit to the museum and then this splitting, I guess. Even with our unexpected detour, there wouldn't have been any problem if it weren't for this traffic. I was thinking of suggesting going back and finding an alternate route, but when I looked behind us, there was already a long line of commuters trying to get home. It was bumper to bumper. We weren't moving an inch. The rhythmic humming of car engines in idle filled our minibus. Horns were blaring from all directions. 3 cars in front of us. A man in a suit stepped out of his car and started spewing profanities, gesturing to the car in front of him, so I suspect some drivers were cutting in line somewhere farther up front. Only less than half an hour before we see if the shade comes back tonight. And we're stuck in rush hour traffic. I'm still clinging on the hope that the shade does not make its appearance tonight, or every night from here on out, at least for this year. Even though I understand that we know so little of the shade to be certain of anything. But we do have 2 things going for us. One is that the shade mostly appears during the darkest time of the night. Like last night, it was almost midnight when it showed itself. Second, if it did decide to be a little bit early, it can only appear in one place at a time, as far as we know. But going by this rule, and since we were split into 3 groups, there is only a 33% chance of the shade materializing in front of us. It's not the most comforting of odds, but it's something to hold on to. Major Coleman pulled out his walkie-talkie and made a call, ordering his guy on the other line to meet us with a new car. Everybody out, Major Coleman said as he turned off the engine. We're walking it. We were standing on the concrete sidewalk outside, waiting for the walk sign to turn green, when I saw another reason causing the heavy traffic. There was a rally. A wooden platform had been erected, occupying 1 lane. From the looks of it, the platform was made in a hurry and on a tight budget. But they do have a microphone on a stand and speakers, though. A girl was currently speaking to the crowd gathered, which were mostly just other protesters wearing t-shirts with UFO logos printed on them. All the cars just passed along. Occasionally some drivers would roll down their windows and express their anger for blocking the road with some choice words. Getting a good look, I read the cardboards they're holding up. We deserve the truth. And no more lies, was the main theme. The girl was talking about how the government was denying that the news this afternoon was evidence of extraterrestrial mutilation, arguing that they hide the mutilated bodies from last night. The bodies were butchered with such precision and accuracy that only highly advanced visitors from space could have done so. No wonder no one takes them seriously. Wow, Leo said. Those people are dumb. We're lucky they didn't make the connections yet, Major Coleman said. If they did, well, we'll have bigger problems than the shade. At the time, there was no one else but us waiting to cross the street. And between the blaring of the cars, the shouting of enraged drivers, and the loudspeakers of the stage, it's unlikely that someone would happen to hear our conversation, so it was safe to talk about it here in the open. Where are we going? I asked. Shopping, Major Coleman said, as if it was practically normal to do so in our situation. Then meet up with my guy at Plaridel Station. Shopping? Leo asked. Right now. Really? We are stuck out here, defenseless, surrounded by all these people. Major Coleman looked at us to make sure that we understood what he was getting at. And I did. I imagined the shade materializing into existence in the middle of the road. Its red, hateful eyes trained on us. Its feet making a dent on the hood of the red Toyota just in front of us after it solidifies once again. The scream of the lady sitting behind the wheels would definitely be enough to get the attention of most, if not all the people in the area. And I'm pretty sure a dark figure running after a bunch of screaming kids running for their lives would be hard to miss. Then I imagine what Major Coleman feared most. The shade, butchering innocent people as it hacks and slashes its way towards us. The bloodshed, the chaos that would surely follow, and our secret exposed. Forget about being defenseless against the shade. If the shade caught us out of here in the open with all of these people, it's easy to imagine that next year would be another dark year. Until now, I still can't believe what scared people are capable of once their lives are in danger. It's revolting to think about, When the walk sign turned green, Major Coleman started walking briskly with his long strides that it was all that we can do not to fall behind without breaking into a run. Good thing Major Coleman was tall than most people, so losing him in the crowd wouldn't be a problem. We followed him inside the mall, up the escalator, and into a hardware store. He talked to the sales staff, who led us to what Major Coleman was looking for, the light and fixture sections. We were in desperate need of lights. But the only choices available were portable torch lamps or flashlights the size of a pen. We ripped the flashlights out of their cardboard casings, put in their batteries, and tested them. The light it produced was small and weak, unlike the searchlights we've used last night. I'm guessing this isn't where you bought those searchlights from last night, I said. We have our own supplier, Major Coleman said. He practically dragged us out afterward. I don't even know if he paid for these. But the sales staffs didn't seem to mind the beeping noises of the metal detectors as we passed through the exit, so I guess it's all right. The other customers looked confused, though. I just hoped they don't get the wrong idea and follow our example. Follow me, Major Coleman said once we were outside the mall. Then he started to run. We tried our best to keep up with him running along the mall. But after passing by 2 universities and running by the whole stretch of the park, my calves were starting to get tight. My lungs were on fire. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Major Coleman was still a few distance up ahead, showing no signs of stopping or even slowing down. He occasionally turns around to check on us. He must have thought that we were doing fine since he didn't ask us if we needed a break. I realized that the only way we can get some rest is if one of us explicitly asked for it. I thought of powering through the fatigue, but the thing is, I don't even know how much farther we're going, so my resolve fell. Finally, when I thought I couldn't do this anymore, Major Coleman stopped at the stairway that leads up to the light railway transit above us. The traffic here is not bad. Only the occasional tricycles and jeepneys. But I don't see any vehicle stopping by where Major Coleman stood. We reached him and stopped, catching our breath. I felt so hot and sweaty that the collar of my uniform was sticking to my neck. Leo leaned against the street post. Kana was panting, her hands on her knees. I joined Demi, who plopped down the concrete. Major Coleman was on his walkie-talkie. "They're 10 minutes out," he said. "Nothing to do but to rest and wait." It must have been 6 because Major Coleman made another call after checking his wristwatch, changing frequencies, asking if the shade had been spotted. "Keep your eyes peeled for the shade," he said. A minute passed, then 2. But nothing. Major Coleman was still on his walkie-talkie, constantly checking the situation of the other groups. I was just starting to feel good from being rested when I spotted the shade across the street, its feet already planted on top of the concrete barrier, and there was still no sign of our rescue.